Hi, I'm Curt Frye, and in this movie, I'd like to show you some ways that you can enter data effectively into an Excel worksheet. So I'll show you a number of different techniques. So I'll start by showing you how to enter the same value into every selected cell. So I will select cells A5 through C7, and as the header indicates, I want to enter the value 1 into all of the selected cells. So to do that, I will type a 1. You can see that in A5, and then I will press Control Enter. So I'll hold down the Control key, press Enter, and I get a 1 into all the values at the same time. I can also do that with a formula. So I'll start by selecting A11, and I'll select a grid of the same size. So it'll be 3 by 3. So I've got A11 through C13. And with all those cells selected, I'll type equal, and I'll just assign the value of A5. So you can see that A11 is pointing to A5, and when I press Control Enter, I get the same values in all the selected cells, but for example, if I click on C12, you can see that it points to C6. So it's in the same relative position as A11 is to A5. Same column, but 6 rows below. So that's why it's called a relative reference. You can also enter formulas using absolute references. So I will start in G11, and again, select my 3 by 3 grid, and I'll multiply by the factor that I have in cell H7, and that's currently a factor of 3. So first I'll show you how to do it incorrectly, and then I will show you how to do it correctly. So I have G11 through I13 selected, and I'll type equal, and I'll make it A11 times H7. And I won't do anything to the cell reference pointing to H7, and that way it will copy over to the right and down rather than use the value itself. So I'll press Control Enter, and you can see that I get 3 and a bunch of zeros. And that's because all the cells here have zeros in them, or they're blank, and that is what Excel was using. So I will select the cells again, and that's G11 through I13, and then on the formula bar, I'll click in the reference to H7, and on the PC, I'll press F4. And unless another program has taken over F4, in Excel, that creates an absolute reference. If I press F4 again, it rotates through, so I have a relative column and an absolute row. Then I get absolute column and relative row. Then we're back to a fully relative, and then pressing it again takes it back to absolute row and column. So with that in place, I'll press Control Enter, and each one of the formulas point to H7. You can also enter data on multiple sheets at the same time. To start, go ahead and select the cells that you want to enter the data in, and these will be the same cells on every worksheet, so be aware of that. Then hold down the Control key and click the sheet tabs of any other sheets that you want to put data in. In this case, I will just do Sheet 2. So I'll hold down the Control key and click Sheet 2. You can see now that both sheet tabs are white, indicating they're selected. So I'll type in the number 1 and then Control Enter, and you can see that the values are now displayed and have been entered into the cells that I selected on the Enter Data sheet. And if I click Sheet 2, you can see that the values are there as well. To deselect these sheets, you need to click a sheet tab that is not selected. And helpfully, that takes us to Sheet 3, so I can talk about the last topic for this movie, and that is using flash fill. What flash fill does is actually easier to demonstrate than it is to describe. So I'll click in cell B4, and my goal is to pull out the first name and last name for each of the names in column A. So I'll start in B4, and I'll type Curtis, and then enter. And then in A5, I have the first name, Elaine. And you can see when I start typing that flash fill, which is the name of the feature in Excel, takes its best guess as to what each of the first names is. And in this case, it's very likely to be accurate because for all of these individuals, it is the first word in column A. So I'll press enter, and the flash fill has been accepted. You can do the same thing for last name. So I'll type in Frye, and then Elaine Thomas, and you can see we get the same thing as before, and the last word is the one that we want. And it looks like it has been identified correctly, so enter, and there we go. If flash fill doesn't happen automatically, then you have a number of ways to try to get it to work. The first is to give Excel a couple of examples like I've done here, and then on the Home tab of the ribbon in the Editing group, click the Fill button, and at the bottom there is the flash fill item. So that's one way to do it. If you want it to happen automatically, then that option might be turned off. So what I'll do to turn it back on, if I need to, is go to File, then Options, and then on the Advanced page of the Excel Options dialog box, I will scroll down until I get to Editing Options. So actually that's here at the top. And I have here Enable Autocomplete for Cell Values, and right below that is Automatically Flash Fill. So if that's off, you don't get flash fill. And if this is off, you don't get flash fill. So you need to have both of them turned on. So I'll check there and check there, and the green checks indicate that it will work. I don't actually want to save my change here, so I'll click cancel just to make sure I didn't mess anything up. So I've saved the hard part for last, and that is working with middle names. So let's say that I want to start with Arthur Conan Doyle and have his middle name appear in column C. So I'll type Conan and enter. That's good. And then Dylan, D Ragamuffin. So I'll type a D and then a period and enter. And I don't get any kind of a flash fill. And that's because it's difficult to pick up that particular pattern. However, you can do it if you work with a formula. And it used to be very difficult. You had to do right, left, mid, substitute. And some new functions in Excel have made that a lot easier. So those are text before and text after. And very helpfully in our names, we have a space after the first name and before the last name. And you can see that we have the same thing here. I have purposely avoided more complex situations. For example, names of some of my friends from Barcelona and Madrid have a lot of names together, and it's just the custom of where they live. So for those, you will need to do some more work. However, if you only have first, middle, and last, then you can do some good work with it. So let's start with cell C6, where we do have a middle name. So I'm going to identify all the text that is after the first space. So I'll type equal and then text after. And this will not be a complete solution, just so you know. So I'll have A6, then comma, the delimiter, which we need to indicate by text using double quotes. So double quote, then a space, then another double quote, and enter. And we get Conan Doyle. So that's everything after the first space. Now we need to identify all the text in C6 that is before what is now the first space. So I will edit that formula, and I'll do text before, and then using the text after function's output as my first argument. I'll type comma, then in double quotes another space, and enter, and we get Conan. So there is that value. So I'll go ahead and click cell C6, and I will drag up using the fill handle to copy the formula. You can see that I have an error, and I will drag down, and for every cell that has a middle name or a middle initial, I get the result with periods, which we'll deal with in a moment, but also errors. So the first thing I will do is get rid of the error, and that is to indicate that if there is an error, then we just leave the cell blank. So I'll double-click C4, and then I have, after the equal sign, the if error function. So I'll type that, and then, so I have if error. So if I get an error from the function I have here to find the middle name, then I'll type a comma, and in that case, the output, if there is an error, will just be a blank. So that's two double quotes with nothing in between. If there is no error, then I get the middle name. So I'll press enter. The error goes away there, and I will double click the fill handle of C4, and there we have no errors, but we still have those periods or full stops after the middle initial. If you want to get rid of those, and you probably should, so you're working with pure text, then you can use the substitute function to get rid of the dots. So I'll start in C4, double-clicking, and I will type substitute. And then I have my text at the top there. And then I want to have the old text and the new text. So I will click to the right, then a comma. The old text, again, is the text value, so it needs to go in double quotes, is the period, then a comma, and I just want to get rid of it, so two double quotes together with nothing in between. Right parentheses and enter, and nothing changed in C4, but now when I click C4 and then double click the fill handle, then as the formula is copied down, you can see that the periods go away. And nothing says that you need to do all of these steps that I showed you here within the same formula. I personally find it easier to do it that way, even if the formula does spread out a bit. So that's how you use flash fill and the other techniques that I showed you here. If you like what I showed you, then be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel.